is 2. There are 2 things here. There's an origami crane and a piece of paper. I'm just kidding, of course. There's just one thing. The crane and the paper are the same. But watch this. Where'd the crane go? If the paper and the crane were truly identical, they would share everything in common. But clearly, they don't. The paper can survive being unfolded, and the crane cannot. Also, I made the crane, but I didn't make the paper. And the paper was around before the crane. For 2 things that are the same, they sure are different. This relationship is called constitution. Paper constitutes the crane. It's a one-to-one relationship. But there's another kind of being made of going on here, too. This paper, for example, is made not of one other thing, but of sextillions of things. Fundamental subatomic particles, electrons, quarks, or strings, or physical and virtual fields. This many-to-one relationship is called composition. Philosophers call whatever it is that matter is ultimately composed of symbols. A symbol is a thing that, unlike a piece of paper, has no parts, no substructure, not even a top or bottom. Now, it could be the case that there are no symbols, that there's just a never-ending chain of smaller and smaller substructure. Philosophers call such a reality a Jungian universe. If structure never ends in the other direction and everything turns out to be part of something bigger with no final complete composite, that is known as a Jungian universe. Is believing ordinary objects exist and are made up of smaller things is quite common. It's called ontological reductionism. It's the position that wholes are nothing more than their parts.
So
But
bad.
our crane and our paper challenge that notion. It seems like being made of some things is different than just being those things. Let's agree on what it means to exist. Let's say that for something to exist is simply for there to be more than 0 of it. So Pegasus exists if we mean, are there any winged horses in works of fiction and mythology? And Pegasus does not exist if we mean, are there any physical flesh and blood horses that evolved on Earth through natural selection? Okay, so if we can agree on that, then of course chairs exist. There's this one right here. I can see it, and I can feel it, and I can taste it. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's kind of dry, a little bit salty. Dry and salty are what we call properties. Properties tell us what things are like. For example, this slice of cheese is floppy. By noticing and sharing properties, we can let each other know what to expect from things. And we all more or less agree on what things there are. We give names to stuff, and if they catch on, we put them in dictionaries with the word noun next to them. But are all of these nouns an inventory of the universe, or an inventory of things we name? Let me put it this way. Do islands exist? Well, it's in the dictionary, and a quick look around confirms that there are more than 0 islands. So, yes, islands exist. But what about in-cars? An in-car is a car that is in a garage. As a car leaves a garage, an in-car diminishes at the threshold until it collapses into non-existence. Later, an extremely similar in-car may emerge at the same threshold when the car returns. Are there any cars in garages right now? Well, if so, then in-cars exist. But you might be thinking, that's not a thing. You just made that up. And it's silly. Being in a garage is just a property that a car can have. Stop trying to make in-cars a thing. Okay, but first of all, I didn't make it up. Eli Hirsch did. And second of all, if you think in-cars aren't things, wait till you hear about islands.
Oh my God.
An in-car might just be a relation between a car and a garage, but an island is just a relation between land and some water. Now, of course, Island might be a more useful concept than in-car, but does that make islands objectively more real than in-cars? And what about trogs? A trog is an
See, I'm
object
going
whose
some
parts
mother,
are
so
a tree,
I need a
and
good item.
whatever dog is nearest. Here's a picture of one. Do you see the trog? This is its tree part, and this is its dog part. You might be thinking, come on, how can that be a thing? The tree and the dog aren't even connected. Well, so what? These two pieces of fabric aren't connected, and yet they are a thing called a bikini. Now, sure, if we cut down this tree and burn it for warmth, we don't feel the need to apologize to what's left of the trog for destroying its tree part. But maybe we should? What if some
What is wrong?
extraterrestrials showed up and said they thought dogs and trees composed trogs? Would they be wrong? Could we convince them otherwise?
Numbers move you, but some can stop you in your tracks, like the tens of thousands of people who were done.
Ontological realists believe that we could, that there really is a
Please.
mind-independent answer to the question, what is there? People like Theodore Sider believe that the universe has joints, and that we can cut up reality into objective, real things by finding. Ontological anti-realists disagree. Their position is that what we think there is just one way to cut up reality. It's a good one for us and our needs, but it's not objectively more true than any other. So, who's right? Well, if these
As soon as I get a good
blocks
item, I can't
compose
squander
a
it now.
town, what do they compose now? Just because we don't have a name for this doesn't necessarily mean I haven't accidentally built something. Does it? When do two or more things
Raw.
compose something else? Peter Van Inwagen calls this the special composition question.
It is
In
a skill
material
issue.
needs, he considers possible answers.
Whatever.
Maybe
Next
things
level 2
compose
item, I'll
something
take. It's
only
actually like
when
useful.
they're in contact. Well, that's a good thought, but it doesn't explain how a bikini can
Yes.
or why two books are still just two
Super
books,
useful.
when one is on top of the other.
Okay.
Maybe a certain
That
degree
is
of fixation is required.
very useful.
Melding. If a surgeon sewed us together and skin healed with no seam and shared the same blood supply, even then, it would seem wrong to say that we become some new kind of animal. There'd still just be me and you, but like stuck together. The philosophy of parts and wholes is called mereology, and mereological universalism is the belief that there is an answer to this proposition. And the answer is this: any assortment of stuff, no matter how strange or scattered across time and space, composes a thing. Some pages composed these books, but I don't just have two books here. Oh no, there's also a third one. Let's call it a took, because its parts are two books. There is also something composed of
No.
my left ear, the northern third
Fuck.
of every ground trout in England, and the Eiffel Tower. Just because it doesn't have a name and no one's ever talked about it before just shows a lack of interest on our part. To a universalist, eliminating some components without others is just too arbitrary. We may as well accept them all. Eliminativism is any belief that accepts some composites but eliminates others. Peter Van Inwagen, for example, believes that there are no ordinary objects, no chairs or shirts or shoes. Right here, there are just some symbols added to an arranged shoe something else called a shoe. But he thinks that because people believe that they themselves exist, and he can't see how something could believe it existed without existing in the first place to even think that, there must be people. He goes further, though, that all living things exist. While admitting he doesn't have the outcome, he mentions that because cells that are part of a living organism maintain the organism, while shedding some members
I found pills.
individually different other organisms, unlike, say, waves of water at the moment of collision. Clearly, cells in the act must compose something. That position is called organicism. It's been called the belief that people exist, but none of them wear clothes.
Bruh.
Mereological organism is less generous. It's the belief that there are no trogs or indoors, or dogs or trees, because nothing ever composes. Now, the nihilist does not believe that there is nothing here. There are lots of symbols, but that's it.
It's whatever.
Now, that might sound puzzling. How can a bunch of fundamental particles arrange into atoms and molecules that are arranged like this? Now,
Well, of course.
I mean, that's just what a chair is. Well, good question. Let's call that deflations. Like that this is all silly, and that all these positions are just talking about something. I mean, they all agree on what reality contains. They all believe that there are symbols, and that those symbols are the chair shape. And since that's just what a chair is, they all believe in chairs. Those who say they don't are just being here in a chair. Deflationism has many supporters, and it truly is an issue today. But to address it, we should first see why it would be nice if all these parts did not have a chair. Let's begin with over-determination. If chairs really do exist, shouldn't they be able to interact with us? The thing is, though, everything this alleged chair can do can be described by referencing the behavior of symbols here and any other symbols that happen to come along. An account of the activities of every atom in this room leaves nothing for the chair to explain. Composites are causally redundant. Believing in chairs is believing that, yes, the burning gas on my stove completely describes why the water in the pot boils. There's also magical invisible substance called oil that comes out of my stove and does the same thing as the flame at the same time, and if there was no boilo, the flame would warm the water just the same. But there is boilo. Chairs are no more real than real. Composites overdetermine what happens in the world. They also lead to overcounting. For more on that, let's say
How do you spot? You could analyze how they tackle complex challenges.
Hi, I'm Michael Stevens. I believe from such an entire summer box completely. That's a good deal. But the ontology seemed wrong. If I count some parts, I shouldn't also count the whole they compose.
Health
Even
up.
composite objects use something, right? After all, the composite exists. So if this chair contains, say, 100 sextillion atoms, then there are actually at least 100 sextillion and one things here. All of the atoms and also the chair. That seems wrong. But wait, there's more. If I take it and scrape off a tiny part of this chair, is it still a chair? I think most of us would say that yes, it is still a chair. It would still be a chair even if I removed a tiny bit again. And again, a series of tiny, innocuous removals is called the sequence. The trouble they cause is that while it seems almost accepted, individual steps annihilate the chair. Clearly, removals will eventually leave us with a chair. Nothing at all, in fact. But how can that be? How can subtracting
Judgment.
0 over and over again ever give a different result? Well, clearly, there must be a point at which a tiny change does make a difference. Now, different people might give different answers as to where that line is, but, we could just stipulate the boundaries. We could define chair in some extremely precise way. If we did that, if we defined the shape, function, and history that makes something a chair so precise that even the smallest information could make or break its status as a chair, how could we know if we've done it right? If we called up God and said, hey, dude, watch this. Okay, see this chair? Okay, now we're going to remove a single atom.
The stars.
Ta-da! It's no longer a chair, is it? Would God be like, that is exactly right. It was a chair before, and now, in my infinite wisdom, I can confirm that that single atom is exactly what made the difference. Unless there's some explanation for why the boundary should be drawn in a precise way, our stipulations are just arbitrary. Objects may be unredeemably vague. Vague may actually be a feature of ordinary objects. For example, how many people is a crowd? 10 people standing together in a huge empty park would be more like a group. But 10 people standing further apart in a tiny waiting room will feel way more alone. The fact that the words have context, that they're plastic, makes it seem less and less like they're describing things, and more like they're pragmatic, that rather than telling us what there is, they tell us what to expect. Peter has pointed out that there's at least one kind of thing that can survive a Sorites sequence without paradox. Stuff. If you innocuously remove tiny pieces from something that is just some stuff, you will still have some stuff after each step until you reach a clear and unambiguous boundary. When the last piece is removed, there will no longer be any stuff. This might show that there are composite objects. So, as soon as we pretend that some stuff is a thing,
I already fucked up, didn't I?
vagueness sets in. Suddenly, we're talking about a thing that can't lose parts but also can't lose parts. And unless contradictions can exist,
What am I
words
doing?
like chair just don't really refer to anything in the universe. Sorites sequences lead to other problems too. The problem of the many. If we're a tiny number of atoms from this chair leaves me with the chair. Chairs are okay, there's this, and there's also this one, which is really similar to the first because it had these atoms on top. You know, I don't have to remove atoms for this to be a problem. All I have to do is try to define which atoms here are part of the chair and which aren't. At the atomic level, there isn't a definite boundary. Near the edge, it will be hard to tell whether a particular molecule is part of the moisture chair or part of the ambient humidity. Instead of there being a single chair here, it seems like there are billions and billions of candidates for the chair. Which one is the chair? But now, suppose that instead of removing pieces like the Sorites sequence, or choosing pieces like in the problem of the many, we instead discard pieces and replace them with new, similar pieces. This is the setup of the famous ship of Theseus paradox. Suppose I buy a boat and Theseus. Over time, parts of the boat wear out. I replace them with brand new parts. After, say, 10 years, I might realize that not a single part of my boat was part of the boat on the day I bought it. Do I now own a different boat? Have I owned two boats? But now suppose that someone has been following me around all these years and has been picking up each old part I throw out and storing them away in a warehouse. After I've replaced all the original parts, they take them and join them back the way they were 10 years ago. Which boat is Theseus? Both? If we conclude that ordinary objects don't exist, the problems of Sorites, the many, Theseus, overdetermination, and overcounting all evaporate. If there are only symbols and they never compose anything, then which one is the ship of Theseus is easy to answer. Neither. Neither are the boat, and nothing ever was the boat. All that happened was that some symbols got moved around. The symbols the scavenger has are the symbols I possessed when I bought the boat. But there's no mystery of persistence. Removing or exchanging a piece of stuff never left me with the same stuff. There's also no mystery as to which of the billions of chair candidates here is the chair. And the removal of no specific atoms will ever stop it from being a chair, because there is no chair here, and there never was. There are only symbols arranged chair-wise. The illusion that there are composites that can survive changes in their parts is an artifact of our minds. It's a helpful one that allows us to track certain things and ignore others, but when taken seriously, it obviously is not really how the universe works. And that's okay. We shouldn't be embarrassed when we talk about about boats or chairs, our words for ordinary objects really do refer to actual phenomena, and therefore are more correct in believing that, say, the sun turned into a black hole yesterday. Unlike the false statement that chairs exist, there is no evidence
Too
that
bad.
saying the sun turned into a black hole yesterday could even be incorrectly described. Because of this, Trenton Merrick's calls the belief in ordinary objects false, but nearly as good as true.
Weather update from
San Juan, Puerto Rico. This is all silly though, right? Of course there are chairs. If you believe that there are some symbols arranged chair-wise, then you admit there's a chair because that just is what a chair is. It's not some additional thing over and above these symbols. It just is them. Each is an atom or electron or whatever, but together they are a chair. Well, not so fast there, chair lover. What do you mean a chair is symbols arranged chairwise? The phrase symbols arranged chairwise just picks out these symbols. There's nothing else for that phrase to refer to. There aren't these symbols and then also some other symbols that are the symbols arranged chairwise. So, do you mean that chair is a disguised plural? Then it refers to lots of things, just like the phrase these books. Because these books only convince us to the existence of this book and this book, but not an additional object that's called a
The
these
lovers.
books. Likewise, if chair just means this symbol and this
Ace
symbol
of
and this symbol,
clubs.
well then it points to a whole bunch of things, and not one of them is a chair. Sure, chairs exist if by chair we mean a word for all its symbols, but if by chair we mean an actual object in the universe, there just aren't any, my friend. Except, maybe there is no chair over and above the symbols, but instead, something happens when a suite of symbols are arranged into a chair shape. Each member continues to be a single atom or whatever, but collectively, they all simultaneously become one thing, a chair. Okay, so then either there's no chair here, just symbols, or somehow a miraculous contradiction has appeared. And also one thing that despite both clearly differing in that respect, are still identical. It looks like chairs cannot be identical to the parts they're supposedly composed of. But chairs also can't be different from their composite parts because there's nothing else there. And after counting and accounting for their parts, there's nothing left for the existence of a chair to pause or explain. To rescue chairs from non-existence, we need to find a way to show that a chair is independent of its atoms and therefore distinct, but not so distinct that it's impossibly over and above them. We need to find a way to make chairs ontologically innocent, to have their cake and not have it too. Amy Thompson does this in a very clever way. She points out that if I ask you, hey, is there anything in the fridge? And you look inside and see that it's empty and say, there's nothing in it. It would be weird if I came over, looked inside myself, found a single eyelash in the corner and said, excuse me, what is this? You said there was no thing in the fridge, but there was an eyelash. And gosh dang it, the whole thing is actually full of air. Now that would be weird because when I asked if there was anything in the fridge, it was implied that I meant anything to eat. By arguing that the empty fridge is not really empty, it's just a word thing, in what Thompson calls I use any and all entities that could possibly be described. But you need to be using thing in what she calls a sortal sense. A sortal is a term that tells us what a thing is in a way that allows us to count how many there are and know when there is or isn't. Water is not a sortal. If I told you there was water in the basement and you asked how many liters, I have to use a source to answer. For example, gallons of water. This argues that the neutral use of thing is meaningless when used to ask questions. For example, if I used thing in a neutral sense and asked how many neutral things are in this video, you would have no idea how I wanted you to turn it all up. Thus, there would be no single correct answer. You might say, one each thing? You're sure? But then I could say, what? No, there's my left sleeve, my right sleeve, the inside of the shirt, the outside of the shirt. Come on, there's way more than one. Unless we use symbols, any search for what things there are will end in confusion. Not because there are no things, but because it has to be made clear what conditions to apply when searching. For Thomason, this means that what we find depends on what application conditions we use. If I ask if there's anything here that the condition smaller than a molecule applies to, you could note each such thing and give me an inventory. Chair would not be on that list. But if I asked you if there were any medium-sized, rigid according to human strength things here, chair would probably go on your list, and no single atom. If an application condition is satisfied in the world, then the thing it describes exists. So, chairs exist. If the application conditions for one thing are also sufficient for something else, then if we find the first thing, we have found the other, because its existence is entailed analytically by the existence of the first thing, that is, by meaning and logical law. For example, if I say that I live in a house, you can conclude, without looking, that I live in a building. There's no paradox here. I don't live in a house and a building, two distinct things that defy the laws of physics by being co-located. Instead, the conditions that apply to a house are also sufficient for a building. So, a single chair is not impossibly identical to some collection of many, nor is it somehow over above its parts. Instead, atoms arranged chairwise merely logically entail a chair. The entailment connects things differentiated by distinct application conditions. When we ask which one is the ship of Theseus, a puzzle erupts because we're being too neutral. We need to say what we mean by ship of Theseus. Do we mean the original parts? Do we mean the thing registered to me by the boat authorities? Well, then it's this one. Well, which is the real one? It's an incomplete pseudo question. When it comes to Sorites sequences, I think we need to just stipulate what the boundary is. I don't think there's an objective answer provided by the universe or God as to what exactly is and is not a chair. But that doesn't have to mean that there aren't any chairs. It can just mean that every single collection of symbols is its own unique object, independent of our minds, and that we get to decide which to call chairs. Vagueness comes from our mind and our language, but there are no vague objects in the universe. We don't have to believe that our reality is simulated, but I do think we have to believe that it's stipulated. It is a reality that contains not what intelligent machines have decided to give us, but what we have decided we have.
Low-key,
There's no fact of
defense.
the matter as to whether calling this a star is the true way to carve up this star. It's a pretty useful way to do it and helpful for purposes. Star is the name imposed on the world. As Michael Jubian puts it, there are no things, but as a consequence, there are as many things as we like. Now, as for the problem of the many, we can simply just admit that there really are billions of slightly different chairs here. Some include a few boundary atoms and others don't. But since they all act and react pretty much in unison, in our daily lives, it just doesn't matter which exact material collection we mean when we say this chair. However, let's go back to our crayons. talked about holes, we said that holes might be ontologically parasitic, that their existence seems to require the existence of something else, something that can host the hole. Perhaps our plane is wholly too, not a physical thing in its own right, but a disturbance in some paper. There is no material plane here, there's only some paper arranged like lines. But once we start entertaining that notion, we realize that nearly everything we see and feel, all ordinary objects within ourselves, are ontological parasites. Michael Julian calls it the tendency to think that what is true of a chair is true of the material that is chairing, object fixation, or property repression. Object fixation is useful and nearly as good as true, but when paradoxes loom, we should remember that while chairs do exist, they are not made out of matter and cannot be touched or felt or tasted. All I can do is taste some stuff in chairs. If it looks like a duck, swims like a duck, and quacks like a duck, then it's not a duck, but it is a range of duck lines. I think that the only concrete physical things in our universe are symbols. Or, since our universe could be gunky, the material world only contains stuff. And yes, this stuff is chairing. But the road paved by the idea that makes this stuff a chair leads to paradox. To see how we could have made that mistake, let's remember the famous Clintonian dictum that often it depends on what the meaning of is. There's the is of predication, which tells us what something is like, as in, this cheese is floppy. And then there's the is of identity, which tells us what is the same as what. For example, 2 plus 2 is 4. To believe that chairs are made of matter, to believe that you are made of matter, is to confuse these two isn't. When a collection of properties is extremely thorough in telling you to expect some stuff, we tend to just go ahead and bound them, focus them in a single word, and believe it doesn't just describe some stuff, but refers to it. I think we have an intuitive sense of
Bombs
the thoroughness
are
of
key.
properties, and this can be seen in how we our adjectives. Big can mean many things. A big diamond and a big house are very different in size. Blue tells me a bit more about what to expect, but cheeseburger, oh, that's specific. So specific, in fact, that we call it the increasing thoroughness may be partly responsible for the fact that cheeseburger sounds fine, but blue big cheeseburger sounds kind of cool. When we embrace the idea that cheeseburgers are not physical objects, but instead exist as an abstract set of properties like juicy, warm, soft, and so on, the specter of ontological paradox dissipates. You and I are not physical objects mentally. A bunch of different properties, and most of them are very vague. Things like having a roughly continuous relationship with stuff. Now, some of what it means to live does concern your position. The fact that I will still exist, even if I shave off the stuff I call my beard. If I shave off my beard, there would still be some stuff like but it would be different stuff than it was before. We are able to lose parts and change and grow because we are not made of matter. We are hosted by matter. As Alan Watts would say, the universe doesn't contain people. The universe peoples. Chairs and tables and rocks and buckets and people are not made of atoms. They are performed by atoms. We are disturbances in stuff, and none of it is us. This stuff right here is not me. It's just me. We are not the universe seeing itself. We are the sea. I am not a thing that dies and becomes scattered. I am death, and I am the scattering. As always, thanks for watching.
What happens when you connect to fiber? You get internet that brings your digital world to life. Quantum fiber, your world unleashed. Set yourself free with a price that fits your life.
Hey, vsauce, Michael here. This becomes part of the process. It never experienced again. Obviously, we will have that. But it won't have the same beard, and it won't have the same person. It will be on a slightly older, different Michael. But the bearded Michael of the past is completely different. He still exists. Images and video. Hi, I'm the slightly older, different Michael you heard about. I am 130 days older than that guy. 130 days? You know, it really doesn't seem like it was that long ago. Just as an optical illusion is a distortion of our sense of sight, a temporal illusion is a distortion of our sense of time. Some seem slow, like spin and time can seem to take forever, but an entire day is one. Some seem deeper, like we get from recordings that make people from
Oh my god.
or real, or the strange way time seems to sneak by. For example, the songs I like as a kid, Wannabe, Bop, Semi-True Life, are as old to kids born today as the little oldies were when I was born. That'd be true. Am I really that old now? I mean, I shouldn't be surprised. I know how time works, but yet I don't. Far from being just mistakes, these illusions are the edges of another dimension of space-time. Not one given to us by physics, given at all, one made by life. Let's begin. Different things there are. Sitting down and consciously tuning into the passage of time as it happens is called viewing prospectively. You can't do that to time that's already happened, except you can. If I were to ask you, without looking, to guess how long you've been watching this video, you'd probably be able to come up with a guess you were reasonably confident in. You arrived at that guess by feeling time retrospectively, by measuring it as it appears in your memory. Now, with that in mind, we are ready to approach our first illusion, the holiday paradox. A 4-hour delay at the airport before your holiday can feel unbearably long while it's happening. But once you arrive, an exciting day at your destination can seem to fly by. Those feelings are all prospective timing. A week later, retrospectively, the delay often feels like a blip in your mind, and the day of sightseeing feels like a much longer, bigger part of your life. These are the long-short and short-long patterns of felt time. Which one you feel depends on whether what you are doing is empty or full. An empty activity is monotonous, unstimulating, unimportant to you, whereas a full activity is packed with sensations, novelty, significance, context, change, and challenge. Now, I experienced this during my 3 days in isolation. While I was there, time dragged very, very slowly.
The fear I have right now is that it's just Friday. And there's still a lot of time.
But now, years later, it's hard to believe that I spent 3 full days in that room. Jesus, and I barely did. Well, it's believed that perspective time feels fast when an activity is slow because you're not busy thinking about time. If you're pretending to be busy with something else, you won't notice how much time has passed. But to understand retrospective illusions, let's ask a different question. Does time speed up as we get older? Many of you may feel the same way. Looking back, my childhood feels like it lasted so long. But my 20s went by faster, and my 30s are going by even faster than that. A popular explanation is the proportional theory. It suggests that time seems to slow as we age because each new unit of time that we live is smaller relative to all the time we gained before. The year you lived as a 9-year-old was 10% of your entire existence at that point. But when you're 30, another year is just 3% of your life. Studies have found little evidence that weeks, months, or years are retrospectively remembered as passing
Dude,
faster
I
by
think I'm
those
cocky and I can do it.
but decades? Yes. And while it's true that the older we get, the faster we tend to think the last decades go by, that only appears to be the case until about the age of 50.
I'm
After
dead.
that, the speed of decades appears to plateau.
The
A
fool.
leading explanation is that how long a duration
What in the world?
feels depends on how many things in it can be recalled. In my normal life, lots of different things happen every 3 days. But during the 3 days I was in isolation, so little happened that I have few distinct memories from. My mind sees that emptiness and perceives that it was brief. So,
Oh my God.
perhaps a decline in new experiences and rapid novelty as we age means fewer events our brains decide to commit to memory. So then, looking back, because there are fewer distinct memories from more recent decades, we assume they were shorter. You know, reflecting on all of this, it's striking just how many moments are forgettable. John Conant, the author of the Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows, calls the awareness of how few days are memorable. Over time, our specific perceptions of what happened conglomerate into generalized ideas about how things were. Themes, moods, the big picture. What was perceptual becomes conceptual. And concepts are good. They lower cognitive load by bringing out details, leaving us with the broader, lighter gist. But they can also obscure reality, which brings us to our second distortion, chronological illusions. The world of our experience is not made of distinct entities. It's a continuity of fuzzy, overlapping blobs, and we impose concepts on it. For example, is a hot dog a sandwich? Is cereal soup? How many holes does a straw have? Those aren't questions about they're questions about words we made up. Periodization is the chopping up of time into contrived pieces like the Stone Age, the Renaissance, the 80s, the 90s. But here's the thing. Did the 80s or 90s really happen? Mathematically, they refer to years that have 8s or 9s in the 10s place. But conceptually, well, it's not like on January 1st, 1980, we woke up and we're like, oh, it's the 80s, everyone change your clothes. Concepts say too much into the elements that expose their imperfections.
At the same time, we said back.
But what hasn't been discussed yet is the mechanisms by which we
Alright,
allow
I'm
them
about
to
to
do
just
their
fucking-
dirty work. So let's see what we can find. If I asked you to lay down on the floor in this clockless room and get up after you thought a minute had passed, you'd probably do a pretty good job. But if I asked you to get up after you thought 10 years had passed, that'd be hard. We lack an ability to sense and grasp long periods of time. Also, we can't remember everything that happens. So instead of comprehending history's correct scale and structure, I believe that our minds often just use how we think about past events to place them relative to each other in time. One way we do this is through what I call the conceptual comparison heuristic, a technique that use assimilating elements in our conceptual to judge their temporal. If our concepts of two things suggest wildly different times, it's natural to assume that a lot of things happen between them. What happened? The duration separating them must be large. Alternatively, if our concepts are too different, the time between them must be bare of events and so it feels free. It's not a bad strategy. But Tyrannosaurus died out 66 million years ago, and when T-Rexes began to disappear, Stegosaurus had already been extinct for more than 80 million years. To a T-Rex, the Stegosaurus was even more ancient than any T-Rexes. Here's another example. When we think of Marilyn Monroe, we think of a young woman, old, mid-century glamour, Americana, black and white. When we think of the Queen of England, we think of an old woman in color in England and New Zealand. Because those conceptions are quite different, we mentally place each woman in a different time. So it can come as a surprise to learn that they were both born in the same year. Similarly, it can be surprising to learn that Anne Frank and Martin Luther King Jr. were also born in the same year. And if they were alive today, they would both be younger than the Queen of England. When Harriet Tubman was born, Thomas Jefferson was alive. And when she died, Ronald Reagan was alive. This is surprising to many of us because our concepts of these people are to them as adults. But Harriet Tubman was a 4-year-old when Thomas Jefferson died. And when she died, Ronald Reagan was 2. Far from just being amusing, chronological illusions can often have fatigue. America feel like an idea is long before many of us by the overwhelming bulk of events that came before. But our cultures have been alive for a third of America's entire history. And if you were 25, you have already lived through and been a part of more than 10% of America's history. Chronological illusions may also be caused by what I call screw-level heuristic, a technique whereby we place things in time based on whether we construe them concretely or abstractly. In social psychology, construal level thinking describes how abstract and concrete thinking relate to psychological distance. That is, how distant something seems as opposed to how distant it actually is. Now, unsurprisingly, it's been found that people tend to think about things that are psychologically distant more abstractly. But studies have also found that if people are asked to think about an event abstractly, they'll consider it more distant than if asked to construe it concretely. This may explain why things can turn out to be longer ago or more recent than thought. If an event receives especially critical relevance or is suddenly replaced without being referred to events unconnected to it, our minds may shift its construal to a higher level, making it feel further back in time than it really is. Conversely, if attending to the low-level details of an event continues to be important, our construal-level heuristic will make it feel closer in time than it really is. Our third illusion of time comes from the fact that time is always moving forward. Because of that, the psychological distances we feel towards things should also always be changing. But not all of them do. The belief that your place in time is stable is what I call the chronostatic illusion. Tim Urban pointed out that it is now the case that Jurassic Park, Forrest Gump, The Lion King were all released closer to the moon landing than today. As a person who remembers The Lion King being brand new and remembers feeling at that time that the moon landing was old, this is all very weird. The Lion King seems so much more recent than the moon landing ever did. The second comparison heuristic places them far apart. My concept of the 90s probably always strayed from my concept of the present, a little less than it should because the 90s and now absolutely that the 90s and the 60s never did anything. Also, my construction of the Lion King may resist being abstract because the Lion King continues to evolve and happen. The concepts I use to place things in time have sunk close into the Lion King, creating a sort of chronostatic cling that fools me into believing it's more near. The music that was new when I was young has also been tethered in my mind to the idea of new stuff only us kids get, even as it has actually been drifting away, as far away as the stuff I used to think was new. A chronostatic illusion is spectacularly broken when you realize that you have become as old as your parents were. It doesn't always seem quite right. They came first, and as such, should always be older. But suddenly, you're aware of a way in which they are. Your aging with people in the past is not steady. Your parents keep getting older right along with them, but the people they were don't. This can lead to pathetic realizations. They weren't any wiser or more than you are now. Considering the temporal perspective leads us to the chronocentric that our own relationship to time is the best or only frame of reference, or that it's more important and more real than any other. My grandparents used to tell me about how when they were kids, they didn't have television. And I always thought that sounded so weird. I mean, obviously, I knew it was true. What the heck did they do in my time? It wasn't relatable at all. People back then must have been so different. But I remember a time before the internet, and it wasn't that weird. The internet and cell phones are still, in my mind, an additional thing to that. But for my daughter, they will be what we always have. And when I tell her about a time when no one had the internet and didn't even know they needed it, it will likely sound to her just like the old stories I heard about growing up with no TV. And that's bizarre. My grandparents' childhood was weird. It was the olden days. Mine was totally normal. Protagonist symbol is the belief that you are the main character of the universe. Recognizing that you aren't is what John Conant famously called Sonder, the realization that other people, like that stranger over there you will never see again, have just as consuming as I'd like to add that this concept have overleads from the egg from the very beginning. In literature, it describes a story from the start, as opposed to in the middle. That the times of your life are the plot and contain the climax, and that everything before you was just backstory. Everything after, merely sequels. When you realize that that's not true, that you were not born out of stress, that you died before the credits, and that everyone who has ever lived was a fully fleshed out protagonist in their own minds, that feeling is what I call Sonder. Sonder not just for people over there, but for people over there. Photocentric illusion isn't always easy. The people from the past are finished. Unlike us, who still have choices, they tell the same story over and over again. They're also separated by barriers made of their own evidence. The world wasn't actually done. It was suddenly vertical in the present. Obviously, we don't know that. But the arbitrary technical properties of time media can influence our perception of the past nonetheless. If silent films didn't look so much different from what could be done just a few decades later, would it be nearly as surprising to learn that Charlie Chaplin lived long enough to watch Star Wars? When I was in high school, I saw 2001's Pipe Dream for the first time. It blew my mind. I honestly believed that it was a real thing someone had built. Recently, I looked it up on YouTube, and I was like, this is clearly a computer animation. What the heck was wrong with us? The top topic was exactly that sentiment. Now the perception of the past is constantly evolving as technology is. And that's significant. We don't just think about the past. We also think about the past. The material properties of an artifact influence our relationship with what came before and what came away.
Reboot your credit card with Apple. Earn up to 3% daily cash back on every purchase. That
Faded SD pixelated video. Technological features can make the past seem like it was never as real as the present. But some kinds of evidence collapse that photocentric divide. One way they can do it right now is by being demonic. Person can. Such recordings are much more similar to the natural habitat at a time zone. This is not some pageant with endless conditions. It's a view out the time machine. Another way evidence can corrode monocentric illusions might be convention or normal. People in old photos look like serious robots because back then you had to stay in the same pose for a long time. But also, a long-standing truth in world opinion at that point was that smiling it wasn't a sign of happiness, but of drunkenness or stupidity. But every so often, this image pops up online, and people vividly debate whether it's actually old or not. Sure, it's black and white, but the expression seems too normal to really be on a person from the past. It is, however, actually an honest-to-gosh picture taken in the early 1900s. The earliest known photos of the smile. The juxtaposition of an expression someone today with a meaning that suggests that technology in the past means nothing to be harmful. The subject is both dead and undead. Both not as unrelatably far as we may have thought it was. Finally, the chronocentric divide can fade when we find the past captured in a medium that was rare at the time. This is footage taken by an early HD camera of New York City in 1993. It's funny, but there's something almost unbelievable. Watching it isn't exactly like time traveling back to 1993, but it looks more like video taken today than many of us expect. It's like peering through a telescope. We can see them when they can't see us. They appear closer to the aperture. We need to get grasps of what it was like. That's part of the allure of time. As L.P. Martin said, the past is a foreign country. We do things differently. But it hasn't always been that way. Time travel wasn't a common feature of fiction until the 19th century. I thought they had destinations in the same way they are to us now. In the year 2008, it wasn't an insult to call someone 1,000 and late. 1,000 years ago, the culture and technology around me was unlikely to be gods, you didn't expect it to be foreign to your children or your 1,000 years ago, there were no 80s parties. Pre-modern societies were present as a continuation of the past. Changes were interpreted as temporary disturbances of the natural state. But today, we see the present as something special. Change is significant enough and rapid enough now that we would imagine ourselves quite different had we been born 10 years earlier or later. Zachary Sayre Schiffman points out, we fail to realize that people before the 18th century did not see themselves this way. Instead of having a history, they regarded themselves as having an unchanging nature or essence, whose full realization might be impeded or impelled, but not otherwise shaped by events. Nostalgia existed, but for moments and places gone simply because they were prior to or away from here and now, not because they were fundamentally different and categorically irretrievable. As the discovery of antiquities and new worlds and new species accelerate, as the invention of new technology is accelerated, between 1750 the acceleration of history reached a speed at which static or cyclical views of time had to be replaced with our modern view, which understands the past to be essentially different from the present. It used to be that things passed. Now, there is a past. As technological and social change accelerate, the window of time within which things can be trusted to remain stable shrinks. In such a world, to stand still is scary.
You know what's brilliant? Think takes vacations and early retirement is possible.
And startups.
It's brilliant and extravagant to born into.
Time is like the risk of abuse and misuse. Blood vessels, and the connection between your veins and arteries, the history of moving pregnant, survivors often uses medicine to share life. Survivors face serious side effects, such as increased blood pressure, problems thinking clearly, or bladder problems. With fewer depression symptoms, you may begin to feel like yourself again. Ask your doctor about Spravato.
Rosa observed the pre-modern experience of being excluded is replaced in modernity by the constantly present, fear-inducing possibility of becoming excluded. In the sense of getting left behind. Things change faster, and we keep keeping up because we are afraid to die. Whoever lives twice as fast can realize twice as many worldly possibilities, and thus, as it were, live 2 lives in the span of 1. Whoever becomes infinitely fast no longer needs to fear death, the annihilator of options. Acceleration becomes a secular substitute for eternity. To achieve this salvation, we try to make things faster and easier to save time. But one of the greatest hoodwinks we ever pulled on ourselves is not noticing that the things we do to save time make us less and more open. No technological change is only technological. All our cloud and what's available and where they live. So cities change, personal associations change, groups, divided neighborhoods, created new opportunities, while ending others. Jobs and industries and cultural forms of expression and all society sprang into existence simply because we found getting faster. Likewise, smartphones and the internet made information access and communication easier and faster. But that's not all they did. Along with them came new social conventions, new communities, new levels of exposure to ideas and conflict, a new understanding of what it meant to be human. That's why they had to adapt. They even made mind when they had spaces are with not just what's being said, but also what has been said. And it's all right there, not tucked into the library across the kind of statue of the it's in our minds and outside of time. Things used to acquire signs of age, veneers that took to their place in time. Now, they're not that important, but always felt like that. Digital spaces are so packed with timeless messages between bygone people that we don't even ask, is anyone here? Instead, we ask, is anyone now? In order to adapt to all of this, we have to consume information in an increasingly dehumanized, decontextualized, and decentralized way. Each next bit is often unrelated to the last. Our participation is not acknowledged or assumed, and it's all fed to us by machines we don't know and didn't know, that only put it in our eyes and ears. The sheer weight of all of this accreting information and its growing accessibility is awe-inspiring. I mean, what else reduces social techniques? Purposefully or not, we record, save, collect, organize, and preserve events like nothing else in the universe. I've said before that if humans were to go extinct, the sun would still shine, the universe would keep expanding, Jupiter would continue being gassy, but the universe would lose its best autobiography. But the technologies of this project have yet to address our bodies. Enter the technologies. The short and functional patterns of it was first observed in people watching TV. They reported feeling like time flew quickly.
this. Yeah, dude. I'm done, brother.